And as if things couldn't get any worse, well, they are going to. Hey everybody, thanks for checking in and welcome once again to another episode. And today we're going to ask the question, can you still find cheap vintage lenses? When I started this channel, they were abundant. It was kind of in the era when people didn't want vintage lenses and there were so many around you could pick them up for, well, in some cases, pennies. Now, prices have increased since then. They've not increased that vastly. They're still, vintage lenses are still accessible and within the range of, you know, the ordinary Joe or Joanne. But they have increased in price and some of them represent a significant investment. So today we're going to be asking the question, can you still find cheap vintage lenses? And the answer is yes, and I'll prove it to you because I have just found one. It's this one. It's a beautifully made lens. I found this in a charity shop in Southend-on-Sea just yesterday. And there we are. Let's have a look at this one. What is it? It is the Vivitar 28mm f2. Right, f2. When I bought this lens, I thought it was an f3.5 for some reason, but when I got it home, I found it was that rarest of beasts, a 28mm f2. Now then, if you want to buy one of these from Nikon or from Olympus or Canon or one of the major manufacturers, of course, it will cost you quite a few bob more. But this one cost me £15, and it was quite a find because it usually sells for around £40 to £50. So it was a pretty good charity shop find. Let me take it off the camera. Well, do I need to take it off the camera? Yeah, I'll take it off the camera and show it to you. Why not? This is a Minolta mount version. I really wasn't sure which version this was. It took me ages of trying various different adapters to find out what this actually was, and it turns out it's a Minolta version. And there's the front glass, and we can see all the lovely anti-reflective coatings on there. It's got this nice big front element there. This one has still got its past sticker on. That was an indication of very high quality in Japan back in the day. It is marked in this green and white script, and the markings are, I think they're engraved. Yeah, they are engraved. There's a little depth to them. They're not raised. In fact, they're lowered below the surface, so they're engraved. There's the Minolta mount at the back, if we're interested in that. And there is the lens itself. As I say, it's really nicely made. The only part of it that's a little bit slightly less than really nice is the aperture ring, and that's just got that slightly plasticky feel that some of the cheaper lenses had. It's made by Kiron, and I've used a Kiron lens in the past. I think it was 27 to 80 that my friend Alan at work gave me. This is Kiron badged Vivitar. Focusing ring turns beautifully and smoothly, and I was really quite happy to find this lens. All right, so is it any good? Well, what do we actually mean by good? I mean, if you apply that word to a modern lens, for example, what good means is very, 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 very sharp at all apertures, with a nice soft background blur at all apertures and in all positions, and you know, all distances of subject, background and camera. Modern lenses do that, and they're really, really good at that, but these lenses don't do that. They're not good at that. They have optical flaws. They were put together by people actually calculating the you know, curvatures of the surfaces and so on, sometimes with slide rules, later on with computers, but they were calculated. And so they have errors, and this one does have one or two errors. Let's see what I've written in my notes. Yeah, I mean, it's really soft, wide open, really soft. It's got a sharp-ish circle in the centre. Sharpish is the best I can say of it. I wouldn't call it sharp. And the edges, yeah, they're even softer. So, I couldn't look at this image and say this is a sharp image because it just isn't. It also has quite a lot of bloom. If you have a light coloured thing or a white coloured thing or a bright part in your shot next to a relatively darker part, well then you kind of get the light spilling over. It's as though the brighter object is shining and radiating its brightness, and that's called bloom, and it's often seen on earlier uncoated lenses, but here we are, we've got it on this one fully open. So it's a soft image fully open with a sharpish region in the center, and it's also got plenty of bloom. Now, as it's an f2 lens, this will give you some background blur, especially at the closer distances up to 1 meter, maybe even out up to 2 meters if you keep it fully open. And it can make quite a reasonable bit of that. This is a fairly wide aperture for a lens like this, for a 28, and it's very unusual. But what's the blur like? Is it nice? Is it nice? Well, look at it and see what you think. I made my decision almost instantly, and the answer I came up with to the question, is it nice, is no, it isn't nice. It's harsh, it's unpleasant, it doesn't seem to have any uniformity. It seems to be just sort of, I don't know, blah, without any elegance, without any guiding principle. It's just some blur. Look at the out of focus highlights, the specular highlights from point light sources, and you'll see that there isn't really any pattern there. There's no identifiable pattern. There's no swirl. There's no soap bubble effect. There's no anything that would identify this blur. It's totally wild. It seems to be entirely without any guiding principle, and it's just not very nice. It is there, that's the best you can say of it. Now, don't forget this little lens. I don't mean to be hard on this lens. Back in the day, no doubt this got many a budget photographer out of a low light scrape, and that's what this lens was intended for. It wasn't intended to be a lens to make background blur with. It was lenses like this from the film days were intended to give you that extra stop at the expense of quality, just so you could get the shot. Because remember, most films didn't go past 400 ISO. Most photographers didn't use any film past 400 ISO, certainly not past 800 ISO. And it would be a very, very rare photographer, almost always a professional, who would use the then available in the 70s and 80s, but very little used, ASA 3200 film, very, very grainy. Again, you make a lot of compromises there if you use that. So it was a low light lens. It wasn't intended to be a pretty, beautiful soap bubble blur type lens, and that shows, because it isn't. Right, colour is wide open now. I'm still talking wide open. Colour is, it's there. It's there, right? That's as much as I can say. Again, I don't mean to be unkind or uncharitable, and I'm not being unkind or uncharitable, but the colour from this lens, wide open, it's just muddy, murky, just not very nice. It's like someone's painted the whole image with mush and mud and murk and other things beginning with the letter M. It just doesn't give a very nice image. Do you see what I mean? Can you see what I mean from these images? Quite a few of these images I did have to post-process a little bit, just bring up that contrast, bring up that exposure, and see if I could do something with those flipping awful colours, because they really are flipping awful. I just don't like the colours this lens gives wide open. Certainly in diffuse light, maybe in bright sunlight with some lovely coloured things, yeah, you'd probably do better. But in diffuse light is one of those lenses that, and you might know them, there's others in this unworshipful company. It's one of those lenses that it's just murky, it's just muddy, murky, mushy, and not magnificent wide open. Oh dear. And as if things couldn't get any worse, well, they are going to. If you're shooting in sunlight, be really, really careful, because contrast drops quite vigorously. If you're used to shooting vintage lenses, I don't know, something like a Jupiter 8 or a Helios 44 or something like that, you will know that they do very often need a little bit of help when it comes to dealing with direct sunlight, you know, rays catching the lens at an oblique angle or any angle, really. Well, this is one such. It really suffers in the light. So go out with a hood. I've got a few comparison shots here to show you. I shade it with my hand, but, you know, if you don't like the low contrast look, then, you know, use this lens with a hood. I think it will make some nice sun stars, actually, and that is a really nice thing about this lens. It does make some really nice sun stars if you stop it down to f16. I can't recall how many aperture blades it has. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It looks like 6. So 6 aperture blades in it, so it's going to make hex. It's going to make hexagonal, or rather 6-pointed sun stars. So I kind of liked it for that, and I was pleased to be able to coax something nice out of it. Now, before we turn away from the fully open image, you can get a vintage look out of it, and it does give you a nice, pleasingly vintage look if you open up fully open. And so it's really not all bad, it's just mostly bad. However, all is not lost, because stop this lens down from f2, which is a frankly ludicrous place to use it, to f4, or its close sibling f5.6, and my gosh, this thing really, really sharpens up and really comes to life. It's as though a close friend who's always been scruffy and messy has, you know, had a makeover, and suddenly they're like the smartest guy in the office. That's the transformation. It's a massive transformation. It's day and night. It goes from being a lens that you can use in low light in a pinch, on film, maybe even on digital, a lens that gives a washed out muddy image, a lens that maybe you can coax a bit of vintagey look out of if you're lucky. It goes from that to being something really, really special, because this thing really comes alive when you stop it down. Suddenly it's very, very sharp right across the frame, which we would expect. You know, most lenses are going to do this, but right across the frame this thing comes alive, sharpens up, and gives loads and loads of detail. You know, you could cut yourself on these images. If I'd photographed a razor blade, I'd want to be careful how I handled it, because it's that sharp. Colour really smartens up as well, and it goes from being a muddy, mushy mess which frankly is what it was at f2, to something really special. Colours just come alive. It's like the difference between a really cloudy, horrible day. Imagine great dark cloud overhead, yon great cloud, yon huge one. You know, everything's dark, it's going to rain, there's going to be a big storm, and then suddenly the clouds part and it's beautiful sunlight, and suddenly it's the golden hour and you've got beautiful golden light bathing everything. That's the difference. Seriously, that is the difference between f2 and f5.6 as regards colours in this lens, and it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. Greens are impressive, yellows are impressive, reds are impressive, blues are impressive, purples, puces, ochres. I can't think of any other colours, but they're all impressive if you stop it down. Top marks for this lens, stop down for colour. Absolutely wonderful performance. So I've got to ask, this thought passed through my mind with, for example, a Pentax 28mm 3.5 being available for around 40 to 50 quid. Same with Olympus, same with Canon. Nikon a little bit more expensive, but you know, Nikon is Nikon, and you pay for the name. But round about 40, 50 quid will get you an f3.5 28mm, sometimes an f2.8 28mm if you're lucky, from the major manufacturers, which I guarantee you will give better performance, much better performance, wide open. It won't have f2, so you won't have that low light capability. But you know, is there really any point to buying this lens at 40 to 50 quid as it usually goes for? I mean, it's awful open, wide open. It's not great wide open. And, you know, its blur isn't that nice, its colour isn't that nice. And clearly the, you know, errors in calculation that those vintage guys who designed this made don't add up to something beautiful like they do in, for example, a Helios 44 or a Pentax 1.4 50mm. So, you know, we're not in engaging and charming territory at the cost of softness of the image. So it's got great light gathering at f2, but the image is really soft, and I really don't like the blur. It's so unpleasant, I don't think it's really worth having. But all is not lost. At f5.6, this lens is outstanding. It gives really nice colours. It's very, very sharp. At f5.6, it becomes really nice. I mean, you're not going to get much blur at f5.6, but then again, this is a 28mm, and you don't buy a 28mm to make background blur. You buy a 28mm to get a big wide panoramic shot. Very oftentimes that's on the street, or it might be at a family gathering, it might be as I don't know, wedding reception, or I don't know, some event, or anything where you need a nice wide shot, and you don't need blur for the kind of work a 28mm will usually do. So should you buy it? Well, not for use at f2. If you want an f2 28mm, I would say save your money and get something better. But as a 28mm shot at f5.6, this lens is outstanding. Now, I wouldn't pay 40, 50 quid for it. I'd get one for the major manufacturers at the same price. But if you see a charity shop one, or if you see a nice cheap one for sale on eBay, it's well worth snapping up just for what it can do. at f5.6. So there we are. That's it from me for today. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Many thanks to subscribers. Many thanks for your continued support, and many thanks also go to patrons, without whom this channel could not do the work that it does in the same way. So thank you very much for that support. So don't forget, do all those YouTubey type things: like, subscribe, ring the bell, kick the ball. I made that last one up. Ha ha ha. But yeah, do all those YouTubey type things, and thank you for tuning in. And if you're not doing anything next week too urgent at this time, maybe you can tune in again for another spot of Zenography. So for now, cheerio all.